She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She just lit the match, and $49, $380, turned into quiet gold dust in the air. I thought she'd lost her mind. But when she looked at me, I realized it wasn't madness. It was mercy in disguise. That night, the rain hadn't even started yet. The air was thick with something unsaid, something sharp. I came home late, the same way I had for months, thinking no one would notice how much I'd changed, how much I'd begun to vanish inside my own silence. But Emma noticed. She always did. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in barefoot, her hands resting on a small box. I recognized immediately the one I kept locked inside the drawer of my desk. The box that held everything I thought made me secure, 50 envelopes each, sealed with money that was never meant to be touched. Money I'd been hoarding in secret, because I thought control meant peace. When she opened the box, I froze. I didn't shout. I didn't dare. Because in that moment, I saw something in her eyes that terrified me more than anger ever could. Peace. The kind that comes after someone's decided to stop saving you. She stood slowly, her cardigan hanging loose around her shoulders, her voice calm. "You built a cage out of paper, John," she said. "You feed it every day, and you call it security." I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry, like my words would betray me. "Emma, please, don't." But before I could finish, she reached for the box of matches. The first spark flickered, reflected in her eyes like a confession. Then the flame caught the first envelope, the second, the third. I rushed forward, but she stepped back, not in fear, but in certainty. "It's already gone," she whispered. "You just haven't let go yet." The smell of burning paper filled the room, sweet and terrible. The sound was soft, like rain on dry leaves. Each flame folded in on itself, curling numbers into smoke. I could see the ink fading from the corners of the bills, twisting upward into the dim kitchen light, like ghosts of all the times I'd chosen money over meaning. I wanted to stop her, but something in me broke instead. Because as the fire grew, I saw what she saw. The years I'd spent trying to outrun emptiness by counting it. The way I'd used work to hide from guilt. The way I'd mistaken survival for love. When the last envelope turned to ash, she looked at me and said, "Now, you'll finally stop chasing what destroyed you." Her voice was tired, not cruel, just done. I stared at the ashes on the floor, small gray and still warm. 49,380 gone in minutes. But what I felt wasn't just loss, it was exposure. Like the fire had stripped me bare and left me face to face with a man I didn't recognize, the man who'd forgotten how to live without fear. Emma knelt beside the remains, brushing her fingers through the ashes. The faint burns on her skin caught the light. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't the first time she'd been burned. Not by fire, but by me. I wanted to reach out, but my hand stopped midair. There was too much distance, too much smoke between us. She stood and walked past me, leaving the smell of ash and the quiet echo of something ending. Her voice lingered behind her like a prayer. Maybe now you'll see what was worth saving. And in that silence, broken only by the sound of the rain, finally beginning outside, I felt it. The faint, cruel mercy of losing everything that never truly belonged to me. The rain lasted through the night. By morning, the world outside looked clean, but the air inside our house still smelled like burnt promises. I woke up before the sun, half expecting to find Emma in the kitchen, her soft hum, the sound of coffee dripping. Instead, there was only quiet. The kind that doesn't come from peace, but from absence. Her chair was empty. The floor beneath it was stained with gray smudges, the ashes I'd tried to sweep away, but couldn't. They clung to the grain of the wood like memories refusing to fade. The box was gone. The drawer was open. My hands trembled as I reached for the spot where I used to hide the envelopes, as if maybe, just maybe, one would still be there. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about what she'd taken with it. My illusion of control. I walked through each room in silence. Every wall felt like it was holding its breath. The house was still mine, but it didn't belong to me anymore. Without Emma's presence, it was just a museum of my mistakes. The trophies, the framed certificates, the carefully folded bank receipts, all monuments to a man who thought worth could be measured by weight and numbers. On the counter, there was a single note. Not long, not angry. Just a few words written in her slow, thoughtful handwriting. When you can sit with the ashes, you'll know where to begin. I stared at that line for a long time. The handwriting shook slightly near the end, like she'd hesitated. Like she wanted to say more, but mercy stopped her. Outside, the sky was the same color as the smoke from last night, soft, gray fading to gold. I stood by the window, trying to understand what she'd really done. She hadn't punished me. She'd freed me from the prison I'd built, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. I sat at the table, and for the first time in years, I didn't reach for my phone or my notebook or the next plan. I just sat there with the silence, the ashes, and the faint echo of her words. It's strange how loss can feel like an introduction, like you're meeting yourself for the first time, without all the armor you used to wear. Hours passed before I realized I was still holding the matchbox she'd used. One stick left, unburned. I turned it between my fingers, feeling its weight so light and yet powerful enough to end an entire life built on lies. I wondered if she'd left it there on purpose. The sound of rain softened. Somewhere soon in the distance, a church bell rang. Not loud, but steady. And I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but space. The kind of space you need to see clearly, after years of living in a fog, made of your own excuses. I took a deep breath. The air still tasted like smoke, but beneath it, I could sense something new. Not hope, not yet, but honesty. And as the light began to spill through the window, I whispered to the empty chair across from me, "I see it now. Emma, what you burned wasn't money. It was the man who thought he could buy his redemption." Outside, the rain stopped. The silence remained. And for the first time, it didn't scare me. By the second day, the silence had learned to speak. It followed me through the house in the sound of dripping faucets, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of floorboards that used to echo with her steps. I kept expecting to hear Emma's voice calling my name from the other room, but all I heard was the echo of what she'd said before she left. "Now you'll finally stop chasing what destroyed you." I thought I understood it. I didn't. I walked through the rooms like a man walking through a crime scene, searching for clues to a life I'd already ruined. Her coat was gone. Her favorite mug, the one with the small crack on the rim, was missing too. But on the shelf between two books I'd never touched, she'd left something else, a folded piece of paper, yellowed at the edges, with an old photograph clipped to it. It was a picture of us, younger, unguarded, standing in front of our first apartment. I was smiling. She wasn't. Back then I thought she was just shy in front of the camera. But now, looking closer, I saw what I couldn't see before: the faint shadow of worry behind her eyes, the kind that says, "You don't see what you're becoming yet." Underneath the photo were her words written years ago: "If you ever lose your way, look for the things you didn't buy." I stared at that line for what felt like hours. It was her way of saying she hadn't just left me. She'd given me a map. And I knew where to start. That afternoon I drove out to the lake, where we used to go before life got complicated. The sky was gray, the kind of gray that hides the sun without stealing its warmth. I sat on the old wooden dock, the board soft with years, and watched the water ripple in slow circles. The quiet there wasn't empty. It was clean. For the first time in months, I didn't feel the urge to reach for my phone or check the markets. I didn't need to calculate what I'd lost. I just needed to sit with the version of myself she'd been trying to reach all along. As the wind picked up, I remembered something Emma once said when we were younger. "You can't carry both love and fear in the same pocket, John. One will always crush the other." Back then, I laughed. I thought she was just being poetic. But now, sitting by the water, I realized she'd been right all along. Fear had crushed everything. I pulled out my wallet and stared at the cards inside. Credit, insurance, ID, tiny plastic promises of safety. They felt heavier than they should. I took one out, then another. I watched as the wind caught the edge of a receipt, an old one, from the day I'd bought her a necklace to apologize for missing our anniversary. It had cost $1,200. I remembered thinking it was a fair trade for her forgiveness. Now I saw it for what it was, a bribe. I let the receipt go. It floated across the lake, curled, and disappeared into the water. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just breathed, and for the first time in years, the air didn't feel borrowed. As the sun began to sink behind the trees, a strange calm settled over me. Not peace, not yet, but something close to surrender. And in that quiet surrender, I finally understood what Emma had done. She hadn't left to punish me. She'd left to give me back the silence I'd been running from. On my way back to the car, I noticed a small figure standing near the edge of the road. For a moment, my heart stopped. The shape, the stillness, the light falling on her hair. But when I got closer, it wasn't her. Just a woman waiting for someone else. Still, the way she turned, the brief flicker of compassion in her eyes, felt like a message carried on the wind. When I got home, the house felt different. Not haunted, not empty, just honest. And in the middle of that honesty, I finally whispered what I should have said long ago. Emma, I see it now. You weren't burning the money. You were burning the noise. I turned off every light, sat down on the floor, closed my eyes, and for the first time, the darkness didn't feel like punishment. It felt like rest. The third morning came quietly. Light crept across the floorboards like forgiveness, slow and unassuming. The house no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a pause. I moved through each room differently now, as if I were visiting someone else's life. The walls, the photographs, even the dust, they all seemed to be waiting for me to stop rushing through them. On the kitchen counter sat my old phone, the one I hadn't touched since that night. Its screen was cracked, but still glowing faintly. I pressed the power button, and a small red dot blinked in the corner. One new voicemail. My chest tightened. The timestamp was from the night of the fire. For a long time, I just stared at it. My thumb hovered above the play button. I didn't want to know. I didn't want her voice to sound like goodbye. But curiosity, the kind that hurts more than fear, finally won. When I pressed play, there was silence at first. Then her voice came through, soft, unsteady, but clear. John, if you're hearing this, it means I couldn't wait for you to understand. I didn't burn it out of anger. I burned it because I watched it burn you for too long. Every dollar, every late night, every lie you told yourself that it was for us. It wasn't. It was for the ghost of the man you thought you needed to be. Her breath trembled. I could hear the faint crackle of the fire in the background and the sound of rain starting to fall. I didn't want to save the money. I wanted to save what was left of you. If you find this, please don't look for me. Just look at what's still standing. There's more there than you think. Then a pause. A faint sound, maybe a sob, she didn't let escape. And then, I hope one day when you look at the ashes, you'll see that I was trying to leave light behind. The message ended, but her voice stayed. Not the words, just the tone. It filled the room with a warmth I hadn't earned. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. My hands were shaking, not from anger, but from recognition. For years, I'd told myself I was building a future. What I'd really been building was distance from her, from myself, from anything I couldn't control. I replayed the message again and again. Each time her voice sounded different, not softer, not sadder, but closer, like she was still here somewhere between the walls and the rain. I walked to the window. Outside, the world looked new in a way that hurt to admit. The wet pavement reflected the light like liquid glass. The maple tree in the yard had shed half its leaves overnight, but the remaining ones glowed gold in the morning sun. That's when I noticed something small wedged in the window frame. A photograph curled slightly at the edges from the damp. It was us again. From years ago, at that same lake I had visited the day before. On the back, in her handwriting, "If you're here, you're already halfway back. Halfway back, not forgiven, not redeemed, but seen." I sat down on the floor beneath that window and played the voicemail one more time. This time, I didn't cry. I just listened, breathing in every word as if it were oxygen. The irony wasn't lost on me. She destroyed what I thought was everything, and somehow I felt more whole than I had in years. Her fire hadn't consumed me. It had revealed me. When the message ended, I whispered to the empty room, "You didn't leave me nothing. Emma, you left me truth." And for the first time, truth didn't feel like loss. It felt like light. The fourth day was colder. The kind of morning where even light feels heavy, as if the world itself was hesitant to wake. I brewed a cup of coffee, but it tasted like metal. My hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the question that wouldn't leave me alone. Where did she go? I told myself I wouldn't look for her. That's what she'd asked. But there's a difference between obedience and surrender. And I wasn't sure which one I was capable of. The voicemail kept playing in my head over and over. Her voice, her calm, that haunting sentence, "I hope one day, when you look at the ashes, you'll see that I was trying to leave light behind." I couldn't stop thinking about it. Leave light behind. That's when I saw it, a faint shimmer under the table leg. I crouched down, brushing the floor with my fingertips. It was a small, crumpled envelope, half burned, wedged between two floorboards. I pulled it out carefully, afraid it might disintegrate. The edges were blackened, the paper soft with moisture, but the handwriting, hers, was still visible. For when you're ready to see, inside was a single train ticket, Pine Hill Station, dated 2 days earlier. One way, no return. I felt my heartbeat slow. Pine Hill wasn't far, a small town we used to drive through years ago. The kind of place people forgot existed. I remembered her once saying she liked how quiet it was there, how the church bells sounded softer, like they were ringing through clouds. I didn't think, I just grabbed my keys. The drive took 2 hours. The landscape blurred past fields, half drowned in mist trees, stripped of their leaves, the horizon dull and endless. I rolled down the window, letting the cold air sting my face, hoping it would remind me that I was still alive. When I reached Pine Hill, the station was nearly empty. Just a few benches, a vending machine that didn't work, and a woman sweeping leaves near the ticket booth. I showed her the envelope. "Have you seen this woman?" I asked. She glanced at the handwriting, then at me. "She was here," she said softly. "Sat right there on that bench for nearly an hour. Didn't talk to anyone, just stared at the tracks. Then she got up and left before the train came." "Do you know where she went?" The woman shook her head. "No, but she left something behind." From her apron pocket, she pulled out a small object, a key. Old bronze, tied with a faded gold ribbon. Attached to it was a tag that read Cedar House Room 3. I knew that place. It was a small inn near the edge of town where Emma and I once stayed the night we decided to move into our first home. I drove there without thinking, my breath shallow, my thoughts racing through every version of what I might find. The innkeeper recognized the name immediately. "She stayed 2 nights, he said, paid in cash, asked for a room with a window facing east." He handed me the guest book. Her signature was there, steady and deliberate. No note, no message. Just her name, Emma Miller. When I entered room 3, the air felt untouched. The bed was made. The curtains were drawn. On the windowsill sat a candle burned halfway down. Next to it, a folded piece of paper. My name on the front. I opened it slowly. "You always measured life by what could be earned, but peace can't be bought, John. It has to be lived. When you can forgive the fire, not me, but the part of you that needed it, you'll find me where the light begins." No address, no promise of return. Just that, where the light begins. I looked toward the window. The sun was rising through the fog, casting soft gold across the empty bed. For a moment, I imagined she'd been standing right there, watching the same light I was now seeing. And for the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt guided, I took the candle in my hand, closed my eyes, and whispered, "I forgive the fire." When I opened them, the light had changed. It wasn't brighter, just clearer. And I knew then she hadn't left me to disappear. She'd left so I could finally find my way back. When I came back from Pine Hill, the house felt different. Not empty, but awake. Every sound had weight again, the creak of the steps, the whisper of the curtains. The air smelled faintly of smoke still, but it wasn't haunting anymore. It was a scent of something that had ended so something else could begin. I set the candle from Cedar House on the kitchen table beside the spot where she'd burned the money. The wax around its base was uneven, hardened like memory. I lit it carefully. The flame wavered once, then steadied, small but alive. The note she'd left echoed in my head. "You'll find me where the light begins." I looked around and saw nothing but ordinary things. The sink, the chair, the window. Yet for the first time I understood what she'd meant. Light didn't begin somewhere far away. It began here, in the places I'd ignored. I went upstairs to her study, a room I'd barely entered in years. It smelled like dust and lavender. The curtains were half open, and sunlight spilled across her desk. There were notebooks stacked neatly, old receipts, letters. She'd always been a collector of moments I was too busy to notice. One drawer was slightly ajar. I hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside were dozens of unsent letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The top one had my name on it. "John, if this ever reaches you, it means I couldn't keep pretending we were still the same people we once were. I know you love me, but love that's afraid to lose will always destroy what it's trying to hold." My throat tightened. The ink was smudged, as if she'd started to cry and stopped herself halfway. "I've watched you build walls around pain and call them plans. I've watched you save every dollar as if the future could forgive the past. But every time I looked at you, I saw the boy who once told me that life was worth more than comfort. Do you remember that? Before success, before fear, before you started counting instead of feeling." I could barely breathe. Her handwriting looked fragile, but the words cut with perfect precision. "I wanted to reach you before the fire did, but sometimes only fire can speak to stone." I pressed the letter to my chest, and for the first time I realized how long she must have been preparing to let me go, not out of anger, but out of mercy. She had been writing her goodbyes for years, one letter at a time, waiting for me to be ready to read them. Under the stack I found one envelope that looked newer. The paper still clean, the ink darker. It wasn't sealed. Inside was a single page. "When I burned the money, I wasn't trying to destroy what you built. I was trying to show you that you didn't have to keep burning yourself to feel alive." You always thought the fire was punishment, but it was revelation. It showed us what couldn't survive and what could. There was no signature, just one more line at the bottom, faint like a whisper. She couldn't finish saying aloud, "If you ever forgive me, don't look for me. Just stand where the fire ended. You'll see what I meant." I folded the letter carefully, my hands shaking. Downstairs, the candle flickered as if it had heard her words. The flame bent toward the open window where a cold breeze carried the faint scent of rain. I walked to the kitchen, staring at that same spot on the floor, the burn mark where she'd turned $49, $380 into light. The ash was gone, but the scar in the wood remained dark and permanent. I knelt down, tracing it with my fingertips. For years I'd called it loss. Now I understood it was an altar. The candlelight trembled across the surface, and in its reflection I saw my face older, smaller, but still capable of learning. She hadn't left me to disappear. She'd left me to remember. I whispered, "You were right, Emma. Fire doesn't destroy everything. Sometimes it just clears a place for truth to live." The flame steadied again, and in its glow, I finally stopped trying to bring her back. I just let her be wherever the light had carried her. I didn't plan to leave the house that morning, but when the sun rose, it came through the window in a way that felt like an invitation. The light stretched across the floorboards, touching the candle Emma had left, and for the first time, I followed it. The world outside felt quieter than I remembered. The air had that stillness you only notice after loss, the kind that doesn't ache anymore, just listens. I got in the car and drove with no destination, letting the road decide for me. Each turn felt familiar, though I hadn't taken these roads in years. My hands moved on instinct, guided by something softer than memory. After about an hour, I reached the old chapel near the edge of town. Emma used to come here sometimes, even though she never called herself religious. She'd say, "It's not about belief, John. It's about silence. Some places hold it better than others." I parked outside, unsure if I should go in. But then I saw it, a faint reflection of gold on the front step. It was her wedding ring, not lost, placed. I froze, staring at it in the soft light. The gold had darkened slightly from years of wear, but it was unmistakable. The small engraving inside E&J 1998. I remembered the day I put it on her finger. I'd promised her everything, though I didn't understand what everything really meant. I picked it up carefully. It was still warm from the sun. On the stone step beneath it was a note folded small enough to fit under the ring. My name again. "I left this where the fire ended. Not the one in our home, but the one in us. You once told me the hardest part of love was knowing when to let it be. I finally understand what you meant." The handwriting was steadier than in her other letters. Not sorrowful, just resolved. "You don't need to chase me anymore. What I wanted you to find wasn't me. It was peace, the kind we kept searching for in the wrong places. Keep the ring if you wish, or return it to the lake where we first promised each other we'd never become strangers. Either way, let it belong to something that can still breathe. I sat on that step for a long time, the ring in my palm, the words sinking into the space between my ribs. Some promises aren't meant to be broken, but some are meant to be released. I'd spent years trying to hold on to the version of us that stopped existing long before I noticed. She'd simply accepted what I refused to see, that love can survive even after the life around it ends. I looked up at the chapel doors. They were half-open sunlight spilling inside like a quiet confession. I walked in. The air was cool, carrying a faint scent of wax and cedar. No one else was there. Just rows of wooden pews and a single candle burning on the altar. I walked closer, set the ring beside the flame, and whispered, "I found you, Emma. Not at where you were, but where you've always been, in what's left standing." The candle flickered, then steadied. I don't know why, but it felt like acknowledgement, like somewhere, somehow, she'd heard. Outside, the world looked different again. The clouds had thinned. The sun filtered through painting, everything in the same muted gold that had once filled our kitchen. The same light that had burned our past was now washing the road ahead. I drove to the lake that afternoon. The water was still mirroring the sky so perfectly that the horizon disappeared. I stood at the edge, the ring between my fingers, and whispered, "You freed me, Emma." Then I let it go. The ring fell through the reflection, breaking it into ripples that shimmered in the light. It didn't sink right away. It danced, catching one last glint of gold before vanishing beneath the surface. And in that moment I understood. She hadn't left me behind. She'd left me forward. The fire had ended. The light had begun. The days after the lake blurred together. I didn't count them anymore. Time had stopped being something to measure. It was something to sit with. I spent my mornings walking through the quiet, letting the air fill the spaces where guilt used to live. Each evening, I'd light the candle she left, not as a ritual, but as a reminder. Some flames are meant to stay. On the fifth morning, the mail arrived. I wasn't expecting anything, but the envelope at the bottom of the pile made my hands freeze. No return address, just my name written in Emma's handwriting. The ink looked tired, like it had been waiting too long to be seen. Inside was a small voice recorder. Old, the kind we used years ago when I'd leave her notes before business trips. There was also a folded slip of paper for when silence begins to hurt less than noise. I stared at it for a long time before pressing play. At first just static. Then her voice, faint, raspy, almost carried by wind. "John, I don't know if this will reach you, or if you'll even want to hear it. But if you do, it means the fire did what it was meant to." Her breath wavered. I could hear her trying to steady herself, like she was speaking through pain. "There's something I never told you. The night I burned the money, I'd just come from the hospital. The test results weren't good. They said the treatments wouldn't change, Mom. I thought about telling you. I really did. But I couldn't bear the look you'd give me. The one that turns love into fear." I stopped breathing. The room spun slowly around me. "I didn't want you to spend the rest of your life chasing what couldn't be saved. Not me, not the years, not the numbers. So I gave you something to lose instead. Something you could mourn and survive." The recording cracked a small metallic break, then continued, her tone softer now. "I wasn't angry that night, John. I was ready. Ready for you to live without the weight of me holding you back. I didn't want to leave you in comfort. I wanted to leave you awake." The sound of a match striking echoed faintly in the background. Then her whisper, "If you ever wonder why I chose fire, it's because it's the only thing that can turn destruction into light. You used to say numbers never lie, but they do. They tell you what you have, not what you've lost. And sometimes what you lose is what saves you." The tape clicked softly, the end of the recording, but her words kept echoing in my head, burning deeper than any flame. I sat there frozen. The realization came like a slow, unbearable dawn. She hadn't left to be found. She'd left to be remembered, not as absence, but as purpose. I rewound the tape and listened again, this time focusing on the spaces between her words. The quiet breaths, the small tremors, the pauses where she gathered strength. That's where her truth lived, not in what she said, but in what she couldn't bring herself to. By the third playback, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears came without warning, not loud, not violent, just steady. I whispered to the empty room, "You knew. You carried it alone, so I wouldn't have to." Outside clouds were rolling in heavy, low gold gray, like the stoic gold dusk she loved. I stepped outside with the recorder still in my hand. The sky looked like it was on the verge of rain and light at the same time. I pressed play once more and held it close to my chest. Her voice filled the air again, softer, now almost fading into the wind. "You don't have to find me, John. Just stand where the fire ended. That's where I'll be." The rain began to fall, thin at first, then heavier. Each drop felt like her voice, dissolving the ashes from my skin. And for the first time since she left, I didn't feel alone. That night, I went back to the house. Not because I wanted to, but because something in her last words demanded it. Stand where the fire ended. It wasn't instruction. It was invitation. The air inside was still too still. The scent of ash had faded into something gentler, almost sweet. The candle on the table had burned down to a small pool of wax, but the wick still held a faint glow, as if waiting for me to return. I turned off every light. The room darkened, but not completely. The faint pulse of the candlelight filled the space with a trembling gold. That's where it happened. That's where she let go. That's where I had watched her burn. What I thought was everything. I knelt beside the same spot on the floor, my hand brushing over the scar in the wood, that dark ring of soot I could never bring myself to clean. For months I'd seen it as a wound. Now I saw it for what it really was, the place she'd chosen to leave her truth. I took the voice recorder from my pocket, thumb shaking, as I pressed play one more time. The static returned soft, familiar like breath. Then her voice slower this time, as if it had aged with me. If you're listening again, it means you're still standing there. I wanted that. I wanted you to feel it, not as punishment, but as proof. Fire doesn't take, it reveals. It shows what's left. When there's nothing else to hold. She paused, a quiet inhale. Then her voice lowered almost like a confession. I didn't tell you everything. When the doctors told me the truth, I only thought of you. I knew you'd drown yourself in saving me. In numbers, in plans, in fear. I couldn't let that be your final act. So I burned the life you thought you needed, to save the one you'd forgotten. My throat tightened. I pressed the recorder closer, my hand trembling. You always said you'd do anything for me, John. But love isn't what you do for someone. It's what you stop doing when it starts to hurt them. I needed to stop being the reason you were destroying yourself. The rain started outside, slow, rhythmic. Each drop echoed her pauses. Then just before the static began again, her voice softened one last time. I'm not gone. I'm just quieter now. If you listen long enough, you'll hear me in the space between things, in the calm after the storm, in the sound of the fire dying, in the silence that finally learned to stay. Then the tape clicked. But this time, something new followed, a faint sound I hadn't noticed before. A whisper, barely audible. I turned the volume up. And John, forgive yourself. The words cracked, almost lost under static, but they were there. Barely a breath, but enough to undo everything I thought I knew about her leaving. I didn't realize I was crying until I saw the candlelight blur. My hands trembled as I held the recorder against my chest. For years, I'd been chasing forgiveness as if it were something I had to earn. But she'd already given it in the only language she knew I'd understand. Fire, silence. And now, mercy. The room felt different. Warmer. The candle flickered once, then stilled, as if it too had heard her. I whispered back, I forgive me, Emma. Finally. And in that quiet, I heard her laughter again. Not loud, not real. Just the memory of it carried through time, like smoke that never quite leaves the air. Outside, the rain turned to mist. The light shifted faint but golden, bending through the window, Like her final gesture, a soft reminder that the fire hadn't taken her away. It had only made her everywhere. I sat there for hours, holding her voice in my hands, letting the silence speak for both of us. When dawn came, I didn't move. I didn't need to. The light had already found me. Dawn came slowly, like it was afraid to disturb what was left of the night. The rain had stopped, and the world outside the window looked washed clean. The sky pale gold, the streets still wet enough to mirror the light. I sat on the floor where she'd once stood, the voice recorder resting quietly beside me. For hours, I hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. The silence had already said everything. When the first ray of sunlight touched the burn mark in the wood, it shimmered faintly like something sacred. That same scar I'd once cursed now looked like a memory carved by mercy. For years, I'd measured my worth by what I could hold on to. But this moment taught me that peace begins when you stop clenching your fist. I reached for the candle. Its flame was barely there, trembling, refusing to die. I watched the wax pool around it, thin and clear like a small lake, reflecting the light above. I whispered almost to myself, "You can rest now, Emma." But I knew those words weren't for her. They were for me. I stood up and opened the curtains. The light flooded the room without hesitation. Bright, but gentle. It didn't erase the shadows. It simply lived beside them. That was the truth she'd been trying to teach me all along. That loss and grace aren't opposites. They're the same thing seen from different sides of the fire. On the kitchen counter, the recorder blinked once more before the battery died. I let it. Some things aren't meant to be replayed forever. Some truths are only meant to be carried. I took the candle and walked outside. The air was cool, laced with the faint scent of rain and smoke. The yard glowed faintly in the morning light. I knelt by the patch of earth near the steps, the same place where she used to plant her herbs every spring and set the candle down in the soil. The flame quivered, then caught the breeze, stretching tall for a moment before settling into a quiet, steady burn. I thought about her last words, "Forgive yourself." They sounded simple, but they weighed more than anything she'd ever said. Forgiveness isn't a door you walk through. It's a field. You learn to stand in bare silent, unarmed. You don't wait for peace to arrive. You become still enough for it to notice you. I closed my eyes, and for a moment I could feel her beside me, not as presence, but as balance. The same way fire remembers the shape of what it once touched. I whispered, "You didn't leave me behind, Emma. You left me forward." A soft breeze passed through the trees, bending the candlelight toward me. And in that flicker, for just a heartbeat, I saw her smile again, not in grief, nodding goodbye, just light. The flame dimmed, then steadied. I watched it until it burned down to the wick, until all that was left was the thin curl of smoke reaching upward, rising, vanishing, becoming something I couldn't hold, but finally understood. I stayed there as the sun climbed higher, letting warmth replace weight. There was no grand revelation, no sudden redemption, only quiet recognition. The kind that doesn't heal you, but makes the pain make sense. As I stood, the world felt wider, the air softer. The ashes were gone. The fire had done its work. And as the last trace of smoke faded into the gold of morning, I said her name one final time, not to call her back, but to let her go. Then I turned toward the light and walked,